Welcome to Being Human with Steve Cuss.
And Lisa Cuss.
On Being Human, we take seriously Jesus' command to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And what we look at is the dynamics that get in the way of all those relationships. Your connection to God, your connection to your neighbor, your connection to yourself. We look at things like reactivity, triggers, assumptions. We also go deeper into things like stuck predictable patterns. And we give you the tools so that you can relax into God's presence, be connected well with yourself, so that you have a deeper capacity to love and serve others as well. Now, each week on the show, we light a candle. And before we light a candle, we want to actually show you a brand new candle that we have made that you can actually buy.
Yeah, we're super excited about the new candle. What we're calling is the Capable Life candle, that comes in two different colors. We've got a gray and we've got a almost like a Christmas white that is here.
The technical name is ivory.
But with the season coming up,
sure.
Christmas white,
Indeed.
yes. And just printed on it is God with us. Go ahead.
What's cool about the candle is it's made of sand wax. If you're not familiar with sand wax, rather than a clump of wax, this is an environmentally friendly candle. So that for those who are joining us on video, this candle is pre-lit. So you take the clump of wax out and you're left with the sand. And it's really cool because then you just refill your candle with sand or sand wax. And then you stick a wick in it. So our little package comes with several wicks. And you can choose how many wicks you want in your candle. We're just going to do one in this candle, but you can do 3 or 5. And Lisa and our team have built a prayer guide to go along with it.
And I wanted to say one of the things I really like about this candle is even the process of filling it. There's something about watching the sand, the wax sand go in, filling it yourself and realizing that it is God who fills us. And we've put together an Advent prayer guide that will begin with the first week of Advent. And it is a guide that's going to be there for you and your family to be able to look at the themes of hope, peace, joy, love in Jesus, all leading up as we await the gift of love and redemption that is in Jesus, born on Christmas Day.
Yeah. So those of you who have a candle lighting practice with us, this comes in a beautiful gift box. You can go to stevecusswords.com to order for you. They make great gifts. And my favorite thing about the sand wax candle is you keep the ceramic and you just buy a refill of sand wax. And long term, it saves money. And it's
environmentally friendly.
Yeah, it's great. So let's do what we do each week and let's light the candle to intentionally relax into God's presence. And remember what even this very jar is stamped with, that God is with us. Just as I'm lighting this candle, do you think our society is more reactive or less reactive than last time we did a recap episode?
We don't even need to think about it. More reactive.
It just seems like we need more and more work to stay grounded nowadays, don't we? There's so much coming at us.
Yeah, we need more pausing. We need more slowing down just to recognize the true light, the true guidance of God that's with us, whether we feel it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we have a lot of people that join us on Being Human, and we are a global audience, which we're really proud of.
Yeah, we are.
And we're often listening to the feedback, and a lot of you love the tools. Like we've just finished up a 4 Spaces season where we're really digging into the 4 Spaces. Right now, we are in what's called the bigger and smaller season. We'll get into that if that's newer to you. But we just wanted to also make you aware that we've been working behind the scenes on a journal. And you can also purchase a journal. You can get a journal and a candle if you want, both at stevecusswords.com. But basically, if you really appreciate the tools that we cover on the pod, we go way deeper in this journal. It's illustrated. There's all kinds of ways to fill in the blank. You can make your own life-giving list. You can make your own favorite music list in this journal.
And we've started it for you.
That's right. Yep. And it's got beautiful quotes and pages. It comes in a lovely gift box. This is the human-sized journal, A Journey Toward a Well Self. This is a journal guiding you through the tools to be well. So it comes in a gift box. It's a beautiful journal with a couple of ribbons there. And then we've even got it wrapped already if you want to give it as a gift. So particularly those of you who love what we do on this show, but you're wanting to go deeper, really the journal and maybe the candle for you, maybe if you have someone in your life that you're looking for an unusual gift, you can go to stevecusswords.com. We'll put a link in the show notes. And of course, many of you join us on audio, but this might be a great time to pop over to the YouTube so you can see these in person because we're doing show and tell here in the studio.
Yeah. And our desire in all of this is for you to be able to light a candle, to sit with the Lord and to ask the deeper questions that help you connect with Him and help you connect more deeply with your loved ones and honestly, not loved ones around you.
Right. That's right. That's the benefit of this is it actually grows your capacity to connect to difficult people.
Yeah.
And particularly for some people in the holiday season, boy, is that ramping up.
It's needed. Yeah, for sure.
I was actually just with an amazing group of people who work in rescue missions, and we were chatting about the pressure that they face between Thanksgiving and Christmas, when a lot of Christians kind of get a conscience and suddenly want to make a difference and help.
Yeah, and give and serve and
Right. And so they're suddenly dealing with a triple influx of people. So maybe that's you. Maybe your life is about to get more chaotic and some of these tools could maybe help.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, Lisa. So we are in a season where we're teaching people to notice when they are human-sized or when they or their loved ones or their people are getting bigger than human-sized or smaller than human-sized. So I suppose we should
What is human-sized?
That
is the question.
Yeah, so human-sized is when you are exactly yourself. You have nothing to lose. You have nothing to prove. You're more able to connect to others without being triggered. You're more naturally aware of God's presence because you're not trying to do it on your own. I'll talk about being bigger because that's my default. Being bigger than human size would look like my need to dominate a situation so I can be okay. So I tend to get disconnected. I'm no longer, for example, listening to learn. I'm now interrupting. Or sometimes I'm not interrupting. I'm just building a case in my head. So fixing, the tendency to fix is bigger than human size. The need to have the last word. Maybe I'm getting a little more aggressive in my response. Those would be simple examples of being bigger.
Yeah. And it's important that both of these are protective. So getting bigger is protective. It's protecting your values and like who you feel like you are that might be being questioned or judged. Getting smaller is also protective. It is when somebody thinks there is absolutely nothing that I can do. I feel overpowered. I'm not sure that my voice is really going to matter here. Or the response, if I speak, is going to be bigger than I can handle. So I'm going to choose to go quiet. And sometimes that can look like looking down, or it can look like just not talking at all. It can look like nodding and listening. That can sometimes look like agreement with what's being done. It can look like flattery. It can look like fawning. It can look like giving approval, even when it's not really given. But anything where it's kind of like getting smaller, you deny a piece of yourself. Getting bigger demands that piece of yourself to be seen.
Right. And so you can notice this in yourself, in your relationships. If you're not quite ready to do that, you can just notice it on TV, or you can look at maybe a staff meeting that you're a part of. And what you notice in the bigger and smaller dynamic, you start to pick up on patterns because most of us tend to revert to the same patterns unless there's a leader in the room helping us all stay human-sized. So for example, you could start paying attention to who's always using the most words in a meeting. And then you could pay attention to, oh man, who's never speaking up unless they're called upon. Those would be simple examples of bigger and smaller. I think it's important that we note that quite often people who are bigger, we tend to put more moral value. Like we say, oh, domineering is bad. We are trying to not so much put moral value on it as much as help everybody stay human-sized.
Yes.
I know for me, though, I spend a lot of time with leaders trying to show them that what they think is strong leadership is sometimes just getting bigger. It's like a survival technique that they don't even know.
No, I'd agree.
Okay, so we have a question from a listener, and let's get into that now.
I'd love to learn more about the concept of perceived needs that fuel chronic anxiety versus actual needs, and especially in the context of close relationships, marriage, close friends, parents, family, where our reactivity tends to be heightened. How do you learn when it's appropriate to ask for a need, and when a need is a real legitimate need in the context of relationships. I'm specifically thinking about Townsend's 21 relational needs or nutrients. And then when is there a need that is actually a false need that could be fueling my anxiety and my reactivity?
My favorite thing about Q&A is just to ask you what you would think.
I was just going to say, I love that question so much because it is a wrestling.
Yeah.
And I think underneath all of this, it feels like it should be easy. Okay, this is a false need. I don't need to have this. But somewhere along the line, I do need to be understood, or I do need a sense of what I can control, So I'm so grateful for this question. And I think what's helpful is with what we're teaching with chronic anxiety, that generally chronic anxiety makes you think that you need to have a need filled all the time or by everyone. So that throughout a day, if you are in a conversation and you're feeling misunderstood and you're trying harder and harder and harder because in order to be okay, you feel like the person before you has to show that maybe they agree with you or understand you, then that's a false need. We can actually be misunderstood and still be okay. We can actually do things imperfectly and still be okay. What's important to know is, I love that she said specifically in our marriages, in our families, with our loved ones, we do need a sense of safety and times where we are loved, feel emotionally safe, understood, all of these big things. We do need experiences of that as humans over time. What we're gearing at is when we feel like we have to have it all the time. And as far as our question, as far as like, when do we advocate for it? There is a difference, and I can see in my own life, there's a difference between advocating it and demanding that I must have it. Advocating is advocating a deep desire that you have, and boy, that's vulnerable and brave and good. It is so good and healthy to advocate for our needs.
Yeah.
The demanding to have it would also say that I'm not okay if I don't get this. And that can become a place to really wrestle with the Lord. So it's like, what do I deeply desire in one hand? What might I be demanding because I'm afraid I won't be okay if I don't get it? In the other hand, and come open-handed to the Lord with these is, a really good place.
Yeah. And Rachel references in this question John Townsend's 21 relational nutrients, which, if you're not familiar with that, we'll have a download link in the show notes and you can look at it.
Yeah.
And when you see that list, and if you're not familiar with John Townsend, he's probably most famous for his book Boundaries with Henry Cloud, Christian psychologist, we think a fantastic resource in relational health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you look at the 21 relational nutrients that Townsend has listed and you say, of course, these will make a relationship thrive, but these false needs, I know in my life, when I don't get them in the moment, my body feels like I'm under threat. And rather than trying to connect to the person, I'm too busy trying to get a false need. And so really it's about healthy connection and noticing when you're disconnected. And in the work that we do, what we find is when people are busy chasing their false need, they never get what they want anyway.
This is 90% of what we do in marriage counseling.
Right.
Is how do we communicate and advocate around our needs so that we can see each other, even if we disagree, we can accept each other's experience. And how can we listen and respond in a way that we can both move toward each other?
Yeah. Reminds me why curiosity is such a power tool. Because if you can be curious about your false need and even curious about, for example, one of these relational nutrients, it increases the chances that you and your partner can connect.
Yep. Great question.
Yeah.
So good.
Okay. So we are in a theme all the way through December, looking at what it means to be human-sized. And then the opposite of being human-sized is being bigger than human and smaller than human. And as we often do, we ask the moderator of the bulletin, Clarissa Moll, to come on and actually interview me to get clear. So Clarissa and I, this was our very first conversation about being human-sized, being bigger than human. smaller than human. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I really love the take and the approach she took on this when she asked questions. We often look at this from a micro level, looking at what are the triggers that cause me to get bigger than human size? What are the triggers that make me feel like I can do nothing, so I'm going to get smaller? And then Clarissa really wanted to look at this more at a macro level. So culturally, I think we're used to looking at a macro level as far as when we get bigger and smaller around gender, around ethnicity, around even personality styles, like
Right.
introvert and extrovert have their own generalizations about getting bigger and smaller. But then she took this to look at what about at the macro level of generations, from one generation to the other. Let's take a listen.
I want to talk about some of the specific groups that you referred to as it relates to this idea of being human-sized. And as we understand that this comes from a place of when we aren't human-sized, it's coming from a place of reactivity. And we see a lot in conversations around Gen Z in the workplace that employers complain. Gen Zers don't want to work. They want to get to a position of authority without having to put in their hours. How do you distinguish for a young person between the bigness of normal, appropriate hierarchy within a workplace and dysfunctional bigness?
Right. So there's a big question here. First of all, I both agree with the generational generalizations and challenge them at the same time. I don't remember if it was Plato or Socrates. It was one of the great Greek philosophers that complained about young people nowadays. You can go back and find the quote, but it was back in, BC. And it was one of those big Greek figures like, man, young people, they're lazy and entitled. And I was like, okay. Also, when I hear people describe Gen Z, or even that reminds me a lot of myself at that age. I came in, my first full-time job after chaplaincy was at a mega church, and I was one of 40 associate pastors, and boy, did I think I knew what was up. And I had no idea what was up. And I wanted authority before I'd earned it. I was very questioning of everything. So I am kind of skeptical of the difference between youth and inexperience and generational traits. But really, if a young person is complaining about that, then simply putting some authority on their shoulders as a test balloon can help them grow into that. So whether that's bigger or smaller, I'd have to have a think about that. I generally take the initial, the last time you and I chatted, we talked about the crappy first draft. Yeah. There's so much power in letting someone's first response kind of wash over you and pass through you to then see human to human. Mm-hmm. So like if a Gen Z, you call it Gen Z, the Queen, the late Queen of England compels me to say Gen Z as an Aussie. If your average Gen Z employee kind of came at me kind of demanding, like, give me more. And, I would let that pass, and then I would move into curiosity rather than reactivity. Mm-hmm. Try to get to the bottom of what do you want? And then the second question is, can I give it to them? Mm-hmm. And that's obviously a discernment. But I am personally always trying to develop my younger leaders before they're ready. Probably because that was my own journey. When I was a chaplain, I was not ready. And it was being thrown into the deep end that developed me faster. So I am prone to give young people responsibility before they're ready for it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that gets quite to your question, but that would be my response.
Well, that's wonderful, because I think part of what we're dealing with here is cultural expectations, cultural narratives about what it means to be bigger than life in the world. And we can see this, perhaps in critiques of Gen Z in the workplace as being more than human-sized. But when we look at things like the Me Too movement, about some of the difficulties we have heard from women in the church around sexual abuse, we've seen a lot of women adopting a narrative getting smaller than human-sized to get to safety sometimes. Sometimes getting smaller looks like fawning or flattery in those spaces because women genuinely don't feel safe. It would seem like in those cases, women need to get to safety before they can actually learn new ways of being human-sized in the world.
Okay, so Clarissa talked a lot about generational values. And, this is an issue, right? As each generation, what they value changes and therefore their reactivity to it changes.
Yeah. And I think that's what you just said is the point that we wanted to make is sometimes we think this is a generational thing where the older generation or Gen X disagrees with Gen Z or boomers, bless you, that are there and have had to fight for things too, right? Are not understanding how Gen Zers will show up in the workplace and not want to put in the hard work. And what I think is fascinating is oftentimes the values between generations are similar, but the way they are played out gets tweaked a little bit. So one thing that I'm seeing is for most generations, presence and pastoral care in a church is important. The way that is carried out looks different from generation to generation, and therefore can be misunderstood and assumed that value is not there. And that can create unless we talk about it.
Let's talk about one of my favorite dynamics in churches. I'm currently in a heavy speaking season and I'm spending a lot of time with a lot of church staffs. Let's talk about the midweek Bible study in someone's home and the one person in the Bible study who goes off on a political rant.
Yes.
So this is a common scenario, right? Maybe you've got someone in your small group and you love this person, but they get on a political topic and then something like takes over them and they think they're like being strong, but really they're just getting bigger. And then the rest of the group either look at the ground awkwardly or sometimes they'll look at the ranter and nod. And then the ranter takes that nodding as like, oh, these people agree with me? Yeah. What do you think is going on there?
I mean, this could be a whole episode.
Yeah.
I do think a lot is hijacking is what happens.
Yeah.
And when we listen for the purpose of hijacking, we disconnect and we are outside the reality of what is really happening. And then even the way we read other people's body language, we're so big, I think we can't really see what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say then if you are prone to political rants, pay attention to when you are now disconnected from the people in the room. And just be so careful that their nodding isn't them just getting smaller and trying to survive. So many people think that ranting means that they're strong, and it's actually a coping mechanism.
And on the other side of that, if I find that I get small in political rants, and so being aware that when I would nod or if I look away or don't speak, that also is communicating something. And to be human-sized would be to, quite frankly, say, I hear you, and I don't think this is helpful from my perspective. Then you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah. And then it's quite fun for me when I'm working with the small group leaders because the person's ranting, the room gets quiet, and the small group leader, who's usually a precious volunteer, is saying to themselves in their head, I'm calling the church Monday and resigning. They're like, I didn't sign up for this. And so some of the advanced work we do, if you keep listening to this season of our podcast, we'll be talking about how do you redistribute the anxiety when someone is bigger and smaller.
Yeah.
Hey, before we go to our next guest, let's talk about parenting, because one of the things I learned from you is how to debrief with kids once we're all back to human-sized. Like sometimes what happens is we try to solve whatever the tension or the problem is when we're all disconnected. But actually, you really coached me a lot on waiting for that to happen, getting back to human-sized, and then talking about it.
Yeah, I think as parents, we can so often just want to solve a problem in the moment. And if our value is respect and we have felt disrespected, then we are going to go ahead and be sure that we get that respect right now while we are all dysregulated. So
I'm catching strays over here as you're talking. This is totally my life.
This is totally off the cuff too. What is most helpful in our parenting, and when we have had as parents several values that have been violated, and also it's important to know that in the process, your children have also had, values that have been violated, but they can't put words around it.
Yeah.
That when we can allow time to regulate and not solve it all right away, and allow for space and give permission for a time to calm down, and then come back together, whether it's a day later or a couple of hours later, that then the conversation is more helpful because we are more human sized and we can speak on behalf of that triggered us rather than from that triggered us.
Yeah, when I think of the sins of my parenting, of which there are legion, I think my challenge was I always expected my kids to have an adult brain. And it was so helpful to realize that their preteen brain or their teen brain, it's doing the best it can. It's dealing with all these hormones and situations. And just to not take that first draft of behavior from kids. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, there are some, and they're kind of older now, some Christian parenting books that talk about first-time obedience. We do not find that helpful at all. We actually encourage, let the kid have a rough draft first, and then try to stay connected. And then once you're grounded again, it's really amazing what a preteen and a teen can debrief in when they're well rather than when they're reactive.
It's night and day difference. Yeah, night and day difference.
Okay, so we had these wonderful guests. We had Carla Harding and Brian Heasley from 24/7 Prayer. I learned about these guys from you. Tell us about how you first met them and learned about them.
Yeah, honestly, I can't remember who recommended Lectio 365 to me, but I from the moment that I opened that app up and engaged in that process, it meant a lot to me. So it's about 10 minutes or so each morning. They do a Sabbath prayer on Sundays, and it is reading scripture multiple times with questions about you, questions about God, questions that lead you into prayer for yourself, for the world, for your loved ones. It just has been honestly really settling to my soul and helped me. Actually, it's also led me into praying scripture, which has been very powerful.
Yeah, I had the privilege earlier this year of actually being in the same room at a conference with Carla and Brian.
I'm a little jealous.
Oh, it was amazing to spend time with them in person. But also they offered a morning devotional, and how surreal it was having heard them on the app.
Yes.
To then sit in the room as they led us through. Well, a couple of things, and if you go back and listen to the whole episode, we really pull this idea out. Carla and Brian, from Northern Ireland and Ireland, one grew up Catholic, one grew up Protestant. And I just thought, as I was interviewing them, I thought how timely, particularly in the United States, we have so much religious division.
Yes.
Even within evangelical Christianity, massive amounts of religious division. And here are these people who grew up in religious division now leading us in a unity movement around prayer.
Yes.
That really struck me. And then I love what Carla talked about. One of the great tools, one of the reasons we light a candle is prayer becomes such an antidote to disconnection and anxiety. And so we asked Carla about that. How does she use her signs of anxiety to actually invite into prayer?
So for me, when I start to feel anxious, I feel it physically in my chest here. Like I feel tightness. And the thing I've tried to practice is to become aware when that sensation starts, because it can give me an indication of what's going on inside my mind, my heart, that maybe I'm not yet consciously surfacing. So for me, I try to pay attention to how's my body, like is my shoulders tensing, is my chest tense, and then just take a moment to reflect, okay, why am I in this space of this fearful place? Why do I feel threatened or anxious in this moment? And I find for myself, giving myself a moment to step away mentally or physically, if I can, really helps me. So I'm really fortunate. My job allows me to take time out to pray. I'm paid to do that. What a privilege. Best job ever. So like today, for example, I took an hour to go walk the canal near my home. And I sometimes find that when I'm carrying something and maybe I'm not yet sure why I'm reacting the way I am, that walk for me is incredibly helpful. That's a walk with God. And sometimes I'm just bringing him, God, I'm anxious. This situation is stressing me out. Why? What's underneath this? What am I worried about? And getting to kind of just talk that through with God's that's my ideal. You don't always get that ability to go literally walk off with God and talk, but trying to notice my body, trying to name the thing under the anxiety and the fear. What is it I'm afraid of here? And then starting with God. Okay, God, I name that I'm afraid of this. That's my typical prayer practice in the day when I have these moments. And then do I need to do anything else about it? Do I need to talk to the person that I'm probably projecting all this anxiety towards? Or, is there another step I can take in this? That's usually my pattern of awareness and prayer.
One of the things I love about this quote from Carla, and when we can be at a place where we bring our anxiety, whether it's how we get bigger, the unknown, how we get smaller, and how we respond to it, when we can bring that before the Lord, oftentimes we're really confused of what God's role is and what ours is. And so in this time before the Lord, it's a right sizing of who God is and who we are, which is another way of saying, God is this, therefore I can be human size. And then when we don't understand why things happened or where God is at work and we don't see it, we don't feel it. So quickly, our question is, God, why? God, why? God, why? And often what I found is that can just fuel more anxiety. And if we can just switch our question to God, how? God, how are you at work in this? How would you like me to show up in this? How can I sense you when I'm not sensing you at all? How can I lean into you in this? The how question will get us much further than the why.
Yeah, I've always felt like God has no problem with us asking why. He just doesn't ever seem particularly interested in answering it.
Yeah.
Oh, man. With Brian, we really got into the dynamic of being bigger and smaller. And I love the way Brian laid out for us his own journey of swinging. This is a common thing where we swing from bigger to smaller to bigger. It's difficult to stay human-sized. And in this clip, Brian really talks to us about that journey that he's been on.
I come from a family that's all about winning the argument. They love a debate, and they love and we love Trivial Pursuit because we like to know the answer. And I love it and I enjoy it to this day. But there is something in me that's a little bit like. I reacted to that after a while, Steve, and started to think this isn't the best way to show up in a room. My words can be cutting. I think quickly. I speak quickly. I've learned probably to hold back more than I used to. But the downside of that is I think probably now I shrink back more and become less, and a bit nervous about saying what I really think sometimes. I think there's even on the online debate, I came off nearly every social media platform because it just used to make me too angry. And that wasn't me getting smaller. That was also a bit about me monitoring how much of my time I waste. But at the same time, that whole area where you see people with opinions, I'd want to get bigger and challenge the opinion. And then because I wouldn't literally do it, I would live in this kind of turmoil space of imagined conflict. I don't know if that's a thing. Do you know what I mean? Where you're just thinking about what you want to say. It's there's a French word for it, isn't it? It's called the spirit of the stairs. I can't speak French. Where you walk away afterwards and you think, I wish I had said this, and I would find that I should have said this, I should have done that. And whereas in the past, I just would have done it and thought, who cares about the consequences? Whereas I think now in a world of wanting to be a peacemaker, you can occasionally shrink back and not say the church has got to find a voice that is both, or we've got to find a voice that can challenge stuff. That's the challenge I find there, where it's really hard to challenge without appearing argumentative and wanting to dominate. And then the opposite. I'd love you to tell us how we find that middle space, really, because for me, that's the journey I would find myself on. I'm on this kind of pendulum of like swing this way and that way, and I would imagine right now I would try and be smaller because I don't want to bring my personality and my 30 years of ministry history into the room, and you don't want and people say these things that suck the life out of us. I remember someone once said to me, Brian, when you come into a room, you suck all the air out of the room, and that lives in my head. Because you're like, oh no, my goodness, I don't want to suck all the air out of the room. I want to. So, yeah, I don't want to get on the couch here, but like, I haven't got all the answers to it. But I'm probably aware that as I've got older, I'm more self-aware of like when I'm dominating and being big. And
Yeah.
I almost counterbalance that by being overly small.
Man, I really love his example of that because he went very specifically through where he got bigger to where he got smaller. With the whole purpose of wanting to right size himself. And just for us to know in all of us, when we do this work, it's true that if we are going from a journey of getting bigger to being human size, we're going to feel at times like we're getting smaller and it's going to feel really hard. It's just a pendulum swing.
Yeah.
And the same for when we're smaller and wanting to get to human size. Man, when people use their voice and they've been used to not using their voice, it feels like you are acting huge, but it's really just a step in the journey and in the pendulum swing in order to be able to figure out what it is and looks like and feels like to be human-sized.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up. Like one of the things we try to encourage people is they're noticing themselves human-sized, especially if they're like perfectionists. They picture human-sized as a tightrope.
Yes.
When we are trying to say it's actually a wide vista. There's lots of room in being human-sized. And so as you are noticing yourself getting bigger or smaller and swinging, you're trying to find that room in the middle where you can be exactly yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
Hey, a couple of years ago, I came to you and I said, I really need some fresh voices on the pod. Who are you loving nowadays that you're learning from? And you told me about Alicia Britt Chole. I'd never heard of her before, but you read her book.
Oh my gosh, yes. One of my favorite books, The Night is Normal. Incredible. And it's a new take on the dark night of the soul with the truth that God has also created plants that only grow in darkness. Only grow in darkness. And there's proof of that. And oftentimes when we face the dark night of the soul or dark nights in our soul, however you want to play that out, that it's something that we just want to get rid of and we feel like is wrong and bad. And when we can open ourselves up to say, how are you showing up, God? And what might you be doing? That even in that darkness, there is growth, there is rootedness that he's working on that we have no idea, and it is sacred. And so the dark nights are just as important as the sunlight.
Yeah, so I reached out to Alicia and she very kindly came on the show. I feel like I just spent the whole time being schooled.
Oh,
she is such a profound teacher.
She's a wordsmith and incredibly calm.
Yeah, and I think her stories and metaphors, as soon as she says them, you get it. But also, you already knew this about Alicia, and I feel like I was learning in real time. She's been through some things.
Oh, she's been through a lot.
She's been through a lot, and she stewards her pain. I think one of the things that you and I both look for and respect is somebody who stewards their pain, and that's Alicia. And so she just kicked right out of the gate with why she called the night being normal and talking about storms and the Father's company in a storm.
So my dad worked a lot and he was only home at nights. And my amazing mama, who honestly is the most generous soul I've ever known in my life, she grew up with a gripping fear of storms. I mean, paralyzing fear of storms. It was one of the only things my dad did not want me to inherit from mom. And so whenever dad was home at night and some storm would be rolling in, to my mother's absolute horror, my dad would scoop me up in his arms. And wherever we happened to be living at the time, we would go out to the porch and we would sit side by side and watch the storm come in and even experience the storm blowing through if it were possible. And so very, very, very early on, I started associating storms, but in particular night storms, with an opportunity to spend really special time with my dad. So situationally, I had absolutely no authority whatsoever over the coming and the going of said storms. But when the storms came, I learned early that I did have authority over one thing. I could choose whom I spent them with. And that authority makes all the difference. That choice makes all the difference. And I think it's a choice that Jesus models, Steve, when we look at a day where he called it the day when darkness reigned. When we look at Matthew 26 and we see Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, we see Jesus choosing to spend his energy living that night relationally. He went with the 11 to the garden. He took the 3 further in, and then he went even further in to spend time with his Father. He spent the night relationally, and that's probably not our natural default. I think many of us isolate in the night, or many of us invest a ton of energy trying to figure out the situation, trying to have a diagnostic of how on earth we got there so we can reverse engineer our way out of there. But Jesus lived his night relationally, and my dad gave me a great example of that as a child.
I love that. I think it best explains when Jesus then the next morning was in Pontius Pilate's presence. He's being mocked and willfully misunderstood by the religious leaders, and he seems completely connected and present.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't feel a need to defend himself. He knows what's coming, and I know some people would say, well, he was numb. And I'm like, he wasn't numb. He was connected.
Yes, yes. And I wonder if part of the strength of that connectivity, part of the strength of that calm, non-anxious presence that we could borrow from all therapists everywhere, would be his honesty in the night. I think about the words that are used in the night in that Matthew 26 passage, the words he uses to describe his soul: troubled, overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. These are the words Jesus used to describe his own soul. And so we say things, we make t-shirts, Steve. We're like, I want to be like Jesus. Well, okay. Are we willing to be like Jesus here? Or do we have something else in mind? Is there room in our understanding of a faith-filled life for Gethsemane? Is there room in our understanding of living holy for the emotions of Matthew 26? I mean, we see that Jesus was obedient and overwhelmed. He was holy and troubled. And so if we're going to be like Jesus, perhaps we could give ourselves a bit more permission to be like Jesus here.
At another place on the podcast with Alicia, she shares about a pivotal moment for her when she was questioning God at work about 3 years after she came to the Lord. And a story came back to her about a father and his young son, and that the young son would always just kind of hold on to the pinky, like by pinky, with his dad. And that felt really secure. What the young son did not know is that the whole time he was holding on with his pinky, the dad also had his grip on his wrist. So even if the son would let go, the child would be okay. And so they talk about crossing traffic, and the child did not see a semi that was coming by. And he did what he had never done before, and he actually let go of the pinky. And the dad, because he had his grip on his son's wrist, was able to yank him back to safety because he had the grip on him and was actually in control. And then she parallels this with, of course, our relationship with Christ and the grip that God has on us, even when we think it's all of our job to be able to hold on and stay in his grip, that there is a God that has us in ways we have no idea. And leaning into that trust is huge for our development and for our love.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons we really make a case for being human-sized is when you are disconnected and you are bigger or smaller, you're now depending on yourself to be well rather than trusting in God. We don't say this with any shame. It's just kind of functionally how you operate. And it's so easy to forget that God has us. We start to believe we have to strive for God rather than relaxing into God. I'm thinking about the Rich Mullins lyric from his song called Eli, where he talks about the faith, and he says, it's a faith I don't know if I'm climbing to or falling in.
Right.
And I think that's what we're talking about.
And isn't it both?
It's both at the same time. And being human-sized does mean letting go and realizing that you are held. Eastern Orthodox paintings always show God holding humans by the wrist. So if you Google a Eastern Orthodox painting of Peter trying to walk on water and he's sinking, the painting shows Jesus has him by the wrist.
Yes.
And I love that Alicia brought that out.
Yeah, so beautiful.
Okay, so we'll be on Bigger and Smaller for several weeks. Clarissa will be back on to talk more about it. We'll have more guests. And just in this season, you can be noticing, when am I human-sized? When am I feeling connected to myself? When am I aware of God's presence? When am I bigger than human? When am I smaller than human? And you can be practicing just pausing, getting off the anxiety treadmill, relaxing into God's presence, maybe pausing and lighting a candle, maybe doing a life-giving habit. Just as we wrap up this episode, it just means so much to Lisa and I. We hear from so many of you, and it just really means a lot to us. If you would consider pausing now and not just rating, but leaving a review. And if you do, we might even read it right now on the pod. So here is a review from Kristen. She just left this on Wednesday, by the way. She said, "My soul is fed." She said, "Being human, this thoughtful podcast navigates all corners of the heart and slants of the soul. I love the guests and how everyone is so intentional about words and wisdom and intentionality. This heals my weary mind and helps me remember the deep goodness of people and of God." If this pod is helping you as well, we would appreciate you spreading the word. Maybe share this episode with someone who could use it. All of the links are in the show notes to everything we referenced. If you would like to buy one of our candles or a journal, just go to stevecusswords.com and you can click through from there. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.